I sat motionless, as if paralyzed, while my wife of 25 years explained to me why she was serving me with divorce papers. I could only hear half of what she was saying.
Gary, are you listening to me? You look like you're in a daze. Pay attention, okay? This is very important.
I'm sorry. I was distracted for a minute. What were you saying? The terms are simple. There's nothing to dispute. I'm not asking for anything. Do you hear that? Absolutely nothing. You keep the house, the cars, and all the money in the bank. If you sign this, it'll all be over in 3 months. I didn't know what to say. Marcy and I had been married since high school. We raised 2 beautiful twin daughters. Cindy and Sandy went to Columbia University, studying international banking. We had a nice house in the suburbs, and both of us drove Volvos. Marcy had her own credit cards and cell phone. I never denied her anything. Never cheated on her, never verbally or physically abused her. She never showed that she was unhappy or complained about anything. There was no way I could have prepared myself for this. I never noticed anything was wrong. Maybe that was the problem. I wasn't paying enough attention. I understand the mechanics of divorce, Marcy, but can you tell me why? It's probably too late to do anything about it, but I'd like to know why. Marcy sort of went limp in the kitchen chair. It was obvious she didn't want to discuss the reasons and hoped I'd just sign the papers and let her go.
Just tell me briefly, Marcy, what the hell did I do wrong?
You didn't do anything wrong, Gary. You were the perfect husband. Sometimes I hoped you'd screw up and give me an excuse to leave, but you never did. You did a great job raising the kids and getting them through college. You always gave me everything I wanted, even if I sometimes acted unreasonably. You bought me a beautiful house. My parents love you. Don't ever think you did something wrong because you didn't. She looked good for 45 years old. She had a nice complexion and perfect hair. They were light brown, and the chalked strands glistened in the sun. She jogged regularly and her body was trim and tanned. On weekdays, she looked like a Land's End girl, a successful family brand with a wide range of basic closet. But when she needed to, she was glamorous. Marcy was as perfect as I was, as she claimed. I just couldn't understand the reasoning behind it.
I'm sorry, it doesn't make sense. There has to be a reason. You can't just say everything's fine and then walk away. There has to be a reason.
Gary, I'm trying to do this without hurting your feelings or making a fool of myself. Why don't we just leave it at that?
No,
laughs. Gary, I found someone else. He's a real estate developer. He's got a beautiful apartment overlooking the river and a beautiful black Mercedes. He's handsome, rich, and madly in love with me. You've always been a supermarket clerk. I am not demeaning your job because you have always taken care of us and always earned enough to keep the family comfortable. However, you will always be a grocery clerk. I wanted more than that. I couldn't imagine you would do that for me. You were always content with what you were doing, and I never saw you try to improve. It was painful. I was a product manager, and she still thought of me as a clerk. When I had a chance to advance my career and move out of town, I turned down the opportunity to keep my family together. And now look how I was rewarded. I was hurt, but it wasn't worth reminding me of. Does this rich, handsome guy have a name? Clayton Manning. He's the president of Keystone Development. How long have you known him? 6 months. You slept with him? Marcy straightened in her chair. Her eyes darted around the room, and finally she looked me in the face. Yes. I tried to avoid the subject, but since you insisted on bringing it up, yes. You were still married. Yes, I was still married. I cheated on you. I was a whore. Are you happy now? I sat for a moment, and then reached over and took the divorce papers, signed in 3 places, initialed 2, and slid them across the table to her. I think he's a better man than I am. Sorry to disappoint you. I stood up, and as I was leaving the room, Marcy screamed, "No, damn it! That's not the reason. He wasn't better than you, just different. Don't you dare walk away believing that, Gary. Don't you dare!" By then, I was out the door. I was so immersed in my work and hobbies that I didn't even notice Marcy gradually moving her things out of the house. By the time she handed me the papers, she had moved most of her clothes and personal belongings into Clayton's apartment. She had thoughtfully left all the wedding and family photos so I could enjoy them in her absence. When I returned to the house, she was gone. Her Volvo was still parked in the driveway, and I figured she wouldn't need it anymore. She had left a power of attorney on the kitchen table for the sale of the house and car. I spent the rest of the evening getting rid of the beer that was in the refrigerator. By this point, I decided it was over. There was no turning back, nor did I have the desire to. Marcy was gone, and she would never be. The next morning, I called work and took 3 months of overdue vacation. They were always nagging me to take time off, so there was no problem. I had plenty of vacation and sick leave. I quickly called the girls at the college and briefly explained that we were breaking up, but refused to give them any other information. They wanted to call Marcy, but I didn't have her new phone number. I had 3 months to pull myself together and decide what I was going to do. I disconnected the landline phone, I changed my cell phone number and canceled the one Marcy had. The Volvo dealer gave me the low book value of Marcy's car. I had a high school friend, Terry Davis, who was now a real estate broker. He agreed to sell the house unadvertised, at a low price and with a quick settlement. Just to be sure, I canceled all my credit cards and opened new bank accounts. I cashed in my life insurance policies. It was time to get the house in order. After looking through the entire house, I packed up everything that might belong to my wife. There was enough stuff to fill 3 trash bags. I packed the girls' personal belongings into boxes and moved them to a storage unit near the house. Then spent 3 hours sorting through family photos. I put all the pictures of the girls in a box for them. All the pictures of Marcy went in the trash can. I know it was childish, but I didn't give a shit. The big problem for me was the lack of direction. I had no idea what I was going to do after the 3 months were up. Would I stay here or would I leave? Would I keep working or find something new? I had 2 hobbies. I collected coins, mostly cents with an Indian head on them. They were easy to collect and readily available. I bought and sold them on eBay and enjoyed it. My second passion was geocaching, a hiking game using satellite navigation systems consisting of finding geocaches hidden by other participants in the game. It gave me an excuse to get outside and get some exercise. Marcy hated this activity because of the ticks, poison ivy, and having to walk. I didn't see how I could make a living with any of my hobbies. When I wasn't busy with my hobbies, I spent time with the Wall Street Journal. Cindy and Sandy gave me a subscription every year at Christmas. I had no interest in stocks and bonds, but I read everything about farm commodities. I knew more about sugar, wheat, and corn than most market analysts. Of course, it was just a hobby. I didn't put any money into it. I researched all the information available about Keystone Development and Clayton Manning. Terry Davis was able to get more information about Clayton and his current project than I could. He cross-checked some of the information with a friend of his at a local commercial bank. I waited eagerly to see where he would come to. 7 weeks passed. In all that time, I hadn't seen or heard from Marcy. The girls called every week, but I hadn't heard from their mother either. I had a feeling they were on my side, but Marcy was their mother, and I'm sure they had to be supportive of her in some way. I had a few yard sales and unloaded a ton of stuff. I left enough furniture in the house that it would be good to show to any potential buyers. Marcy and Clayton's picture appeared in the society section of the Sunday paper. They were at a political rally, drinking wine with the local bigwigs. A few more weeks passed. Terry made me an offer on the house. It was pretty low compared to the appraisal, but they wanted to close the deal in 60 days, which would be ideal. He had some interesting information about Clayton and wanted to talk about it. We arranged to meet for lunch. I decided to leave the house for a while. I needed a break. Hayes Mountain was one of the best places in the area for hiking and geocaches. Unfortunately, I found all the geocaches there. However, there were 3 landmarks on the mountain. Landmarks are reference points placed all over the country by the government. Surveyors and land surveyors used these landmarks to determine property boundaries. They come in many forms, but are usually metal rods driven into concrete. Finding landmarks is an interesting side game for serious geocachers. I decided that today I would manage to find all 3 landmarks on the mountain. In addition to the GPS, I would have to bring a metal detector with me. Finding a piece of rebar in the woods is not easy, and I needed all the help I could get. The GPS would help me get out to an approximate neighborhood. Most of Mount Hayes was owned by the Madison Land Trust. It was approaching 2,000 acres, 8 square kilometers, but they were constantly looking to expand it. Subdivisions and industrial parks took up most of the vacant land, and the trust had to survive on donations. Next to the trust's parking lot was an orchard and a farmhouse with a large "For Sale" sign. After parking the car, I walked over to the fence by the orchard just to look. It seemed shameful to think that in a little while, this beautiful estate will probably be bulldozed to make way for progress. "Are you going to buy it, or are you just looking at it?" I couldn't help but smile at the elderly man who was walking towards me. He was dressed in work overalls, and instead of a straw hat, he was wearing a John Deere baseball cap. He introduced himself as John Smurd. "Well, if I had $1 million, I'd be more than happy to take it from your hands." We both laughed at that. "You probably won't have any trouble selling it, will you?" "Well, I've got people interested, but I'm trying to hold out as long as possible." "Why?" "I was hoping the land trust would buy it, but they can't seem to find the money. They want to leave the fruit trees in their natural state, which is fine with me. It doesn't please the developers who want to mess it up. I think it would be a great addition to what we have now. How can the land trust compete with the big companies?" I offered them a better deal. "It's listed for $1 million, but I'll give it to the trust for $600,000. Trouble is, they can't raise that amount right now. If they can't do it in 90 days, I'll have to take the option away from the goddamn developer. That son of a bitch calls me every week and I'm sick and tired of him." "An option is not a sale, right?" "No. The buyer buys a promise from me to sell him the land in the next 6 months for $1 million. He pays $100,000 for the option. If he can't raise the $1 million, he forfeits the option payment. It's a good deal for me, but I don't want him to get it. He has the $1 million locked in, so he'll be safe. The problem is that he needs to get all 6 properties for the deal to go through. That's why he's willing to pay more than the place is worth." "And what happens if you don't sell him the option?" "He'll lose his ass, his fixation, his stock, and his basis. Since the land trust can't raise the money, it looks like Keystone has a good chance. However, if he doesn't get that site, he loses the whole deal, including the money he paid for the options on the other 5 sites. That's probably about $1 million. His investors will walk away and leave him hanging. If I had the money, I'd help you out." "Yeah, that's what they all say." We had another laugh and I left for my walk. I found his mention of Keystone interesting. The landmarks were a mile apart. It was in a straight line. On the mountain, it was twice that. The first 2 landmarks were fairly easy to find. They were standard surveyor's markers. The last marker was much older and much harder to find. When I finally came upon it, I found a small brick monument with a bronze plaque attached to it. It was buried under years of leaves and debris. I took a picture of it to publish in the magazine. That's when my life changed. The metal detector was still on. As I moved away from the marker, it started beeping. It was faint, but it was definitely there. I put on my headphones and started scanning the area about 10 feet, 3 meters, south of the landmark. Finally, I pointed it at the target and carefully began probing. You don't usually find metal in the middle of the woods. 5 minutes later, I had a small iron box in my hands. It was wrapped in a heavily oiled piece of canvas. There was a lot of rust on the surface, but the box itself was sturdy. The lock was of heavy bronze, but it still did its job. Quite often, finds of this nature on public lands are considered treasures and should be turned over to the government or some historical agency. For some reason, that option didn't make sense to me today. I put the box in my backpack and headed home. On the way home, I couldn't help but think about what lay in my little box. Gold coins were the first thing that came to mind. Maybe it was full of important documents from the Civil War or earlier. The possibilities were limited only by the size of the container. I cleaned off the kitchen table, pulled out a Foster's, the world's most popular Australian beer, and studied my find. I hated to destroy the lock, but I couldn't figure out how to open it any other way. I had no idea if the mechanism inside the lock was still functioning. I decided that the lock would have to be sacrificed. My bolt cutter made quick work of the task. Inside the box lay another piece of oiled canvas. I carefully unfolded it and discovered 12 pennies. Why would anyone want to bury 12 pennies? These were not regular, everyday pennies, but old, large cents. The most recent date is 1814. The oldest is 1793. Despite the age, you could easily read the date on each one. Surprisingly, there was no green corrosion on them, which is common on old copper coins. I never got into collecting large cents, as I felt I could get more for my money by buying newer cents with Indian heads. However, I did have a book my grandfather left me called The Quirks of the Penny. It talked about the different types and varieties of large cents. I found it boring since I didn't own any of them. It sat on a shelf collecting dust for almost 30 years. Tonight, it would find a good use. I sat up until dawn with my grandfather's book and a magnifying glass. My scanner took beautiful high-resolution photos of each coin. Every crack and scratch on the stamp was perfectly visible, and the condition of each coin was obvious. I slept until noon. I called work to see how things were going. I was told that Phil Williams, one of the company's executives, had inquired about me. They didn't know anything else. I had other concerns, so I didn't pursue the subject further. A trip to the bank was necessary to get a safety deposit box. After a few hours of surfing the internet, I realized that my pennies were worth several $1,000,000. It wasn't about age, it was about their condition and the varieties of stamps. I now understood why drug dealers had to go to such lengths to launder money. There was no easy way to turn my precious coins into hard cash. It would have to be hard work. While having breakfast at IHOP, I noticed another picture in the paper of Marcy and Clayton being pictured at the opening of a new art gallery. She was wearing a black cocktail dress and holding a wine or champagne glass. They were both smiling at the camera. My next move became clearer in my mind as I looked at the photo. After getting the safety deposit box, I called John Smurd and asked him to hold off on making any decisions about the land for a few days. He seemed pleased with the call. I went to the land trust office and asked for directions on how to make a donation to the organization. They were very happy to help me. I was 4 weeks away from finalizing my divorce. For some reason, I felt that this deadline was very important. I spent the rest of the day researching coin dealers and auction houses. I wasn't looking for advertising, but for litigation. Eventually, I settled on a company called Towers and Burns in New York City. They had a solid financial position and seemed to be able to handle controversial sales without much trouble or publicity. I made an appointment with them on Monday afternoon. I called the girls and asked them to keep Monday morning free so we could have lunch together. The front of the Towers and Burns office was a gorgeous showroom. There was plenty of glass and light. The display cases contained the standard variety of collectibles, and the walls were hung with other numismatic paraphernalia. I gave my last name and was ushered into a much less attractive part of the building. Welcome to New York, Mr. Simmons. I understand you have some interesting copper to show us. Is this your first time in the city? I sat down in the straight-backed chair across from James Towers. His picture was in the advertisement, but he looked about 10 years older now. Thank you. My daughters attend Columbia University, so I've been here before, but never on business. I'm not questioning your coin knowledge, but don't you have someone on your staff who specializes in early copper coins? If so, I think their presence would be helpful. I'm not that arrogant, and I also think it would be a good idea. He leaned over to the intercom on the table. Marie, have Cookson come into my office. Maurice Cookson has published several guides to large cents and half cents. I was pleased with his availability. Mr. Cookson also looked older than his pictures. I guess no one likes to look old. Gentlemen, I have 12 special coins that I am offering for sale. I hope to sell 4 of them today and leave the 5th for your consideration. The other 7 I'll save for later. If today goes well, I will offer them to you as well. I know it seems unbelievable, but I think 6 of the coins will fall under the status of census status. I'm sure Mr. Cookson will determine if I'm close to that or not. Since census status cents don't come on the market very often, I was hoping you would be interested. Where did these coins come from? My grandfather left them to me when he died. No offense, Mr. Simmons, but I find that story hard to believe. What do you want to show us? I laid out 4 photographs on the table. Each one showed the obverse and reverse of one of the coins I offered today. They were about 5 times the normal size and very clear. James and Maurice looked at each picture for several minutes. Finally, James spoke up. What do you want for these 4? After a quick look at the results of recent auctions, I've come to the conclusion that you could get about 1,300,000 for them. I was thinking 100, but your figure is not out of the question. Maurice really knew his pennies. I only want 800,000 for the lot, but it has to be arranged in a special way. James leaned back in his chair and smiled. I think we can manage that. What special way are you talking about? I had a letter I took from the land trust that explained how to donate land. I gave it to Mr. Towers along with an advertisement for John Smurd's orchard. I want you to buy this piece of land and donate it to the Madison Land Trust. The price is $600,000. You'll get a very nice tax deduction and become humanitarians. I'll take the rest of the money in cash. Give us a moment, please. James and Maurice retreated to the other end of the room. After a few minutes, Maurice left. James returned to the table. Do you have any coins with you? Yes. I also have a 5th coin that I would like to leave with you. Mr. Cookson returned to the table, carrying a purple crown royal bag. This time he uttered, We are prepared to fulfill your terms on the first part of the bargain and hope you can fulfill ours on the second part. He then dumped the purple bag on the desktop. It turned out to contain almost 100 different coins, mostly gold coins, but there were some silver ones as well. The retail price of this collection was close to $300,000. For a number of reasons that we won't discuss, it's difficult for us to sell them. However, you will have no problem. As far as I understand, you have already sold coins on eBay. Is that correct? I just nodded. These coins inherited from your grandfather should sell easily, and both of us will benefit. I assure you, you won't have any difficulties. This was said with a slight wink. I pondered a little and agreed. I handed the 4 pennies to Mr. Towers, and we all shook hands. Now, Mr. Simmons, tell us about this 5th coin. I held the picture in my hand and looked at Mr. Cookson. What was the highest grade of the 1793 strawberry, nickname for the strawberry coin, that you have ever seen? I have never actually seen such a strawberry, but I believe the highest grade was a fair 12. I rated it a good 8, but I'm not a professional. He wasn't looking at the photo. He was looking at my face when I said that. Both of them tried to look at the photo at the same time. Cookson was smiling broadly, and I saw dollar signs in Towers' eyes. How much? Best offer if you can figure out how to pay me. Would you like a cup of coffee, Mr. Simmons? Sure, black would be fine. They both left the room with the picture, and in a few minutes a young woman brought me a cup of coffee. Mr. Towers will be with you in a few minutes. He has some phone calls to make. Will you be all right? I nodded affirmatively and began to enjoy my coffee. 30 minutes had passed when Towers returned to the room with an absolutely beautiful lady. She had dark eyes, raven hair, and appeared to be of Middle Eastern descent. I guessed her to be no more than 30. She was well dressed and held herself with confidence. For a second, I thought I recognized her, but couldn't remember where from. Hello, my name is Letitia Rothberg. Do you have a passport, Mr. Simmons? Her voice was deep, but still feminine. Yes. Good. Good. We're flying to JFK soon to set up a new offshore bank account for you. Do you have anything to give Mr. Towers? I handed James a 1793 strawberry, and he looked like a little boy at Christmas. Thank you. Thank you, he said as he left the room. We never agreed on a price, but I still had 7 more coins that Towers wanted. Mr. Towers agreed to hold on to the small bag of coins until I returned. An hour later, Letitia and I were already sitting on an airplane flying to the Cayman Islands. She hardly spoke at all. When we arrived at the airport, several photographers were persistently trying to take her picture. She looked annoyed, but was smiling sweetly. I had no idea what the reason for this interest was. It was my first-class flight, and it ended too soon. A bright yellow mini SUV was waiting for us at the terminal. My hostess didn't hesitate to pull her skirt up to her hips as she slid into the driver's seat. To my embarrassment, she caught me sneaking glances at her tanned legs. She seemed amused by my discomfort. 20 minutes later, we parked on the lower level of a mid-sized condominium building. Letitia Rothberg owned the entire building, but she had a private suite on the top floor. "Can I get you anything, Mr. Simmons?" "A beer would be nice." The sight of her leaving the suite was as good as the glimpse of her feet in the terminal. It's not in my nature to ogle young women, but Letitia Rothberg was special. We stepped out onto a small balcony overlooking the ocean. It was beautiful out there, but the wind was too strong for my taste. I guess she was trying to impress me with the grandiosity of the place. It was beautiful, but I was more interested in the new bank account I was getting. "You don't talk much, Mr. Simmons. Surely you have a few questions you'd like answered." I thought it odd that a woman of her class and position was drinking beer from a bottle. I could imagine her sipping champagne or martinis, but not beer. She won't have that figure for long if she keeps it up. "I usually think it's best to wait, but I suppose you could tell me why we needed to come here to open a bank account." "It is an easy, safe, and secure place to get money. I think it will be good for you." "It's only one coin." "Yes, but you have 7 more." "I'm sorry, but that still seems excessive." To my delight, we went back inside, out of the wind. "Can you take this? I brought you here to be my sex slave for a few days." I must admit that the unexpected comment made me smile. I automatically knew it was nonsense, but I still found it amusing. She had a sense of humor. She was beautiful and rich. What more could a man dream of? If only I were 10 years younger. It's not nice to tease an old man. We both enjoyed laughing at the situation. "Come on, Mr. Simmons. Let's go get a couple fresh lobsters for dinner." We finished our long necks and headed out the door. The restaurant and the food were excellent. I didn't really like the wine the hostess chose, but I tried to be gracious. It didn't work. "What was wrong with the wine, Mr. Simmons?" Was I that obvious? I apologize. It was unintentional, a kind of reflex action. When I was 18, I drank cheap white wine like a dog. I've never been so miserable before or since. Every time I smell or taste white wine, I get nauseous. I can't explain it. It's good wine, but don't worry about it. 5 minutes later, we had 2 cold long necks. Oddly enough, there was little conversation during the meal. We each finished the meal with a fruity sherbet and coffee. "Tell me about yourself. Are you married? Do you have children? What do you do for a living? We have all evening, and I'm dying to know what brought us together." That's a lot of questions. I have 2 daughters. Both are at Columbia University studying international banking or something like that. I don't really know. I just pay the tuition. It's interesting. I have a master's degree from Columbia University, and I'm one of their guest lecturers. I got to meet both of them. Did you see them this morning? We had lunch together. They hate it when I make them miss class. You must have gotten married early to have 2 girls in college? That sounds like a phrase a guy would say. I felt comfortable with this Mediterranean beauty. I could have talked to her all evening. "I'm currently separated from my wife." That's a strange word. I never thought I'd use it. She left me for a rich con man. I think he builds shopping malls or business complexes. Anyway, he's got a fancy car and a big apartment. She said she's decided to change me. The divorce will be final in about 4 weeks. That's a stupid reason to leave a good marriage. I assume everything was fine until she met this guy? I guess so. She was never happy with my choice of work. I had several opportunities to advance, but she refused to move. I wasn't thrilled about it, but decided it was necessary to save the marriage. Now I feel like nothing. "So what do you do?" There was an awkward pause on my part. "How do you tell a beautiful, rich, successful woman that you're a grocery manager at a supermarket?" She noticed my discomfort and reacted accordingly. "It doesn't matter. We can talk about it later." "No, it's okay. I'm not ashamed of what I do. It's just that being a supermarket grocery manager is not a job that impresses the ladies. It doesn't bother my daughters, but my wife often purposely forgot to mention it to people. I could tell it bothered her. Do you enjoy what you do?" "Yes, and I'm good at it." The waiter brought more coffee and cleared the table. "Mr. Simmons, I realize you've only known me for a short time, but I think first impressions are important. In a nutshell, what was your first impression of me?" The question embarrassed me. If I answered honestly, I might push her away, and if I tried to butter her up, I was sure she would see right through it and think I was fake. What to do? What do I do? "In a nutshell, I see you as beautiful, intelligent, educated, and confident." Her head was tilted slightly downward and her eyes were looking at me. I noticed a small smirk. I was hoping for some honesty. I'm sorry, but we were having such an enjoyable evening, I didn't want to ruin it. Is your true opinion of me really that bad? I don't want you to resent me. Maybe that's why your wife left you for another man. If you hadn't always tried to please her, your marriage would be stronger. It was mean, but I had to admit there was some truth to it. Miss Rothberg, I think you're cunning and manipulative. You use your beauty and charm to get what you want. You're used to getting your way, and I feel you're a bit of a spoiled brat. You play with men but are afraid of commitment. From all appearances, you know how to make money as well as spend and invest it wisely. If you weren't so obsessed with proving that you're as good as any man, you'd probably make a good mother. I felt bad after saying that, but she made me angry with her comment about my marriage. For a few moments, we just sat there looking at each other. Do you really think I would be a good mother? The mood suddenly improved dramatically. During the short drive back to the condo, things were nice again. I knew she had heard everything I said, but seemed to accept it without argument. She wanted the truth, and I gave it to her. The fact that she wasn't upset made me feel better about being honest with her. My night as Letitia Rothberg's sex slave turned out to be a little boring. It's hard to have sex in different bedrooms. That was okay because I wasn't expecting anything anyway. The next morning I got up first and found a breakfast of fruit, Danish pastries, and hot coffee waiting for me, along with a copy of the Wall Street Journal. The wind died down and I enjoyed relaxing on the balcony overlooking the Caribbean. I could get used to this. Letitia joined me about 20 minutes later and jokingly snatched up part of the newspaper. We sat in silence, reading and sipping coffee as if we'd been doing it for years. I'd known this woman for less than 24 hours, but everything about her was natural and comfortable. I'm afraid my cell phone doesn't work here, and I really feel like I should call my daughter's. Letitia held out her cell phone to me. Be my guest. Cindy, it's Daddy. Where are you? Is everything okay? My cell phone says London. I'm in the Caymans and everything's fine. I just thought I should let you two know that since I didn't go straight home, I'm staying at a friend's house. I had to use her cell phone. There was a picture of you on TV last night. They showed you getting on a plane with Letitia Rothberg. What the hell are you doing with Letitia Rothberg? She's a friend of mine I'm staying with. What's the big deal? Why are you with her? Nothing's wrong. There's nothing insidious going on. I don't understand your concern. Dad, that woman is a barracuda. She eats men for breakfast. Letitia was taking the breakfast tray from the balcony. When she walked by, I couldn't resist. This is my daughter Cindy. She's in New York. She said I should be careful because you're a barracuda. Of course, Cindy heard me say this to Letitia and let out a loud groan over the phone. I could make out that Cindy and Sandy were quickly discussing something on the other end. Why are you there? How do you know her? When are you coming home? Before I could answer any of her questions, Letitia was already standing there with her hand outstretched, waiting for me to hand her the phone. Hi, Cindy, it's Letitia. Your father told me about you and your sister. I'll be in New York tomorrow and would like to have lunch with you two. Where can I pick you up? Of course, there was no way I could hear the other side of this conversation. Who is this professor? Pause. No problem, I'll pick you up from the auditorium at 11. Okay, I'll say goodbye to you. Bye. Letitia gave me back my cell phone. Your daughter said goodbye. I'll have lunch with them tomorrow. I promise to be nice, even though they think I'm a fish. Now, she giggled a little and wiggled her ass and went to her room. An hour later, we were at the Federal Reserve Bank of the Cayman Islands. Under the experienced guidance of my hostess, I set up my first offshore bank account. And 20 minutes later, I saw that $1, $4 million had been deposited into my new account from Towers and Burns. I decided that was a fair price for a 215-year-old penny. After dinner, she asked a friend to take us to feed the mantas. Over dinner, I asked her why she worked for a firm like Towers and Burns and learned that she owned 60% of the company. What else can you tell us about yourself? Apparently, you are a major player in the global financial arena, and I'm embarrassed to say that I don't know anything about you. I was born and raised in London. My father is Israeli and my mother is Turkish. I have an MBA from Columbia University. I am not married, but I have been engaged twice. I haven't had a serious relationship in over 3 years. I've learned not to trust men who show interest in me. I guess you could say I'm cynical, but I feel like most of them want something from me but have nothing to offer in return. It's sad. I was hoping for a ride back to the condo. Does that mean you don't trust me? You gotta take this seriously, you big jerk. I'm sorry if I seemed insensitive. I didn't mean it. I guess it's hard for me to relate to your problem. I'll try to be better. Okay, let's relax. We have a party to go to. We ended the night at a cocktail party at one of the big hotels. Everyone knew her and treated her like a celebrity. I spent the evening trying to remain even more inconspicuous than I was. I was still wearing the city clothes I had worn in New York. I hadn't realized that I was about to travel to the tropics. At first, Letitia seemed obligated to accompany me, but I convinced her to have fun and let me blend in with the surroundings in which I felt comfortable. She did her best, but she was constantly checking up on me for most of the evening. Somehow, I found myself in conversation with a couple of Hispanic gentlemen, cattle ranchers from Argentina. The conversation started with soccer and then turned to fishing. At least the conversation was in English, I suppose, for my benefit. One of them remarked how attractive Letitia looked, not knowing that I was her chaperone for the evening. I felt a little flattered. My contribution to the chatter consisted mostly of smiles and nods. I wasn't knowledgeable enough about any of the topics to add anything of substance until Ramon Duarte brought up the topic of investments. He was interested in winter wheat. I listened as he explained in detail why he was going to invest a lot of his money in something he clearly knew nothing about. I got the impression that he was quite wealthy, and I was a little perplexed as to how he managed to do it. I usually pride myself on having a poker face, but I guess I failed at it this time. Mr. Simmons, I can see by the look on your face that you disagree with me about investing in winter wheat. I'm busted. I was supposed to remain invisible and inaudible. My invisibility cloak failed me. I'm sorry, Ramon. I'm afraid I'm not an investor, and I don't understand the complexities of this case. I called him by his first name because I was uncomfortable addressing him formally. Maybe so, but I get the feeling you have an opinion on the matter. I will pester you until you share it with us. I was trapped. I tried to put on a little smile. I need something fresh to drink. For the next hour, the two gentlemen listened intently as an Alabama fruit and vegetable vendor explained that the excellent winter wheat crop in Alberta and Saskatchewan would more than make up for the poor harvest in the States. The Canadian Grain Board has leased all available silos in North and South Dakota to store the surplus and has even reserved rail cars of grain for short-term storage. Within a week, winter wheat futures will begin to fall and will continue to fall until the market stabilizes. Both Canada and the States will be forced to unload wheat overseas. I was already running out of clever words when Letitia walked up. Ramon and his friend were flattered that she had joined our little group and truly surprised when she grabbed my hand and led me away. What the hell was that, Gary? We were just talking about food, rations. She smiled slightly at me and we left to head back to the condo. The next morning, we flew back to New York where a group of photographers were eagerly awaiting her arrival. A courier from Towers and Burns handed me a small package containing the coins I had left behind. Letitia and I said our goodbyes, and I headed to the commuter terminal for my flight back to Huntsville. The divorce, like the sale of the house, continued as planned. Phil Williams from the main office left me several messages asking me to call him. They again asked me to consider moving to the company's headquarters in New York. This time I agreed. John Smurd also left a message. He wanted to meet for lunch. I cleaned out my locker at work and wished my shifters good luck. There was a picture in the paper of Clayton and Marcy at a barbecue for a local politician. They looked like the perfect couple. It took me all day to scan and identify all the coins in the bag from New York. Since I was 3 weeks away from leaving, I decided to put them on eBay as soon as possible. Everything should be in order as long as I didn't run into any defaulters. It took a full day to post the coin ads and prepare all the envelopes and blank stickers for shipping. All the money went into my PayPal account and from there to my new offshore bank. Now I had the weekend to relax. My Friday lunch with John Smurd was interesting. John was extremely pleased that I had set Clayton up, but was unhappy that I had gotten nothing out of the deal. Explaining that to him would have been too difficult. The lunch went great, and before he left, he gave me the deeds to 5 acres of land on the outskirts of town. He and his wife were leaving for Florida, and he wanted to get the house in order before he left. No good deed goes unrewarded. Shortly after John and I parted ways, my cell phone rang. Cindy and Sandy would be arriving in Nashville in 2 hours. I had plenty of time to drive there and pick them up. The airfare to Nashville was half the price of Huntsville, and the girls were on a budget. I had no problem getting there and picking them up. On the way to the house, Cindy couldn't wait to tell me about Laddish. The lecture hall was hosting an advanced corporate finance course for over 300 students. In the middle of the lecture, the professor stopped to introduce Letitia to the students. She just appeared as if she owned the place. She spoke to the class for about 10 minutes and then announced that she needed 2 students for lunch at the Westin Hotel. We couldn't believe it when she called our names. So you liked her? She's amazing, Dad. How the hell did you manage to meet her? Well, she said she was looking for a sex slave, and I was her first choice. Sandy tapped me on the shoulder. That's not funny. Be serious, okay? What did you guys talk about at lunch? She asked about our classes and school stuff. Sandy giggled a little. She had a lot of questions about you. In fact, Cindy and I agree that she was interested in more than just friendship. I'm 10 years older than her and a couple dollars poorer. I'm sorry, girls, but she's way out of my league. Daddy, she can have any man she wants. Why you? Think about it and give us a clue. From our point of view, you're perfect, but Letitia Rothberg doesn't know you like we do. Apparently, your mother didn't know me either. Things went quiet for a few minutes. My remark about their mother sounded like shit in a punch bowl. It was not my intention to turn my daughters against their mother, and I regretted saying what I said. I'm sorry, girls, that didn't sound right. Your mother is a wonderful woman, and I have no right to say that. Don't worry, Dad. We understand more than you think. Everything was quiet for a few miles, and then, just as we pulled into the Alabama state line, Sandy's cell phone buzzed. Hello. Pause. We got here about an hour ago. Everything's fine. Pause. You're kidding. Pause. Sounds great. I'll tell him. Thanks for calling. Bye. In the rearview mirror, I noticed Sandy giving Cindy the thumbs-up sign. What was that? Sandy leaned over the front seat of the car. Guess what, Daddy? Letitia is flying into Huntsville Tuesday morning. She said you owe her a night's lodging and she expects breakfast in bed. I was flattered to hear this news, but I felt pressured by Letitia and now my daughters. It all sounded wonderful, and I hoped I was up to the task and not just one. The weekend with the girls went great. They spent Saturday afternoon with their mom, but they never met Clayton. I asked them not to mention Laddish. We sorted out all the things they wanted to keep. By the time they left, we had it all sorted out. I made an upfront payment to store the stuff until they finished school. As we drove back to Nashville, they made me promise to try to be companionable with Letitia. When I asked them what they meant, Cindy said, "Just don't make her mad." It was simple enough. They were excited about my move to town. I still didn't understand what Letitia wanted from an old man who didn't even own an Armani suit. When I got home, it was time to relax with a beer and the Sunday paper. There were no pictures of Marcy and Clayton this week, but there was a short story about Keystone Development having trouble financing a local project. Winter wheat futures were at a record low. It was interesting. I called Terry Davis and asked him to come over. It wasn't lunch, but I figured we could talk over a couple beers. Clayton Manning had a mixed past, to say the least. For the past few years, he'd been either broke or wide awake. He'd spent a lot of time moving around to get ahead of creditors and friends who lent him money. His new project began to fail. The people and investors who supported him were disappearing. I never remembered beer tasting so good. Monday morning was better than one might expect. The coins I put up for auction sold much better than I expected. Cookson estimated the value of the coins at about $300,000. It didn't look like they would go that high, but they were on their way to exceeding 200,000. In a little over 2 weeks, I would be a free man. 3 months ago, that would have seemed terrible to me, but today I was looking forward to it. The people who bought the house had negotiated the financing and were ready to close the deal. I thought it was funny that Marcy felt so comfortable with Clayton that she didn't need any of our joint possessions. I wondered if she realized how slippery her future was. At 3 o'clock, I had a meeting with the people who bought the house. A check for $200,000 went immediately into my offshore account. They had no objection to me staying in the house for another week. That satisfied both of us. The next morning, no sooner had I had my coffee than the phone rang. An unknown person formally notified me that Miss Rothberg would be arriving at 10:45 a.m. on Delta Flight 724. I arrived 30 minutes early. Yes, I was a little worried. Anyway, several paparazzi had gotten wind of her arrival and were waiting outside the terminal. I tried my best to be inconspicuous. I parked my car in the short-term parking lot because I wasn't expecting so much attention. Instead of waiting for me to pick her up, she decided to walk with me to my car. Of course, the photographers remembered my license plate number and the cat jumped out of the bag. I'm not used to such a fuss, but Letitia didn't seem the least bit embarrassed by it. She apologized for it to me on the way home. I couldn't get rid of the thought that as she was getting off the airplane, I wanted to kiss her. Silly old man. I was embarrassed by the sparse furnishings in the house. Over the past few months, I'd gotten rid of everything I could. The only things left were the necessities that the new owner had agreed to take responsibility for after I left. My guests seemed amused by my attempts to apologize. There was nothing in the house to eat, so we had a quick trip to the local Taco Bell, her choice. For dinner, I promised her Dreamland ribs. It was nice to be around a woman with a healthy appetite. Letitia, I'm glad you're here, but I don't understand why. I figured you'd be back in business. It's business, silly. I understand you're moving to New York next week. You need a place to stay, and I have a spare bedroom. I'm here to help you pack. A truck will be here tomorrow morning to move anything you can't fit in the car. No furniture, please. How did you know I was moving? It's what I do. If I keep my eye on the little things, the big things come by themselves. That's a load of crap, but I've always wanted to say it. Are you in cahoots with my daughters? I tried to grin innocently when I said that, but it was hard for an old man to appear sly. Her offer was unexpected, but I couldn't think of a single reason to refuse it. Sure. Now let's get some boxes so we can get busy packing. I felt like she would have been more comfortable sitting in the boardroom or somewhere in the bank, but she seemed to enjoy just being with me. I still felt a little awkward about the age difference. We ended up throwing away more stuff than we packed. She had a definite opinion of my closet and refused to listen to my pleas for mercy. Once I was settled in New York, she promised to take me shopping for appropriate clothes. When we were done, there were more boxes than could fit in my car, but not enough for a moving van. I hoped she had ordered a small truck. I put the laptop and small inkjet printer aside to sort through the eBay auction items. We were about to head out to dinner when a new surprise showed up. An RV was parked in front of the house. Letitia and I watched as a driver in an elegant uniform descended from the cab with a clipboard. Are you Gary Simmons?
Yeah.
I have a delivery for you. Where do you want it? What the hell's in there? A car. It's from Mr. Ramon Duarte. Is there room in the garage? The spot in the garage where Marcy's Volvo used to be was empty. I pointed in that direction and nodded my head. I noticed Letitia put her hand to her mouth and giggled. I don't know exactly, but I think she was amused by my confusion. 5 minutes later, I was looking at a shiny orange sports car standing next to my outdated Volvo. What the hell is that? With great pride, the delivery man said, It's a 2008 Lamborghini Gallardo Spider, the Super Leggera model. Isn't it the most beautiful thing you've ever seen? Letitia could hardly contain her laughter. She wasn't boisterous or anything, but she was definitely enjoying it. I signed the shipping form so the elegant uniforms could go home. I had no idea what I was going to do with my gift, but I knew I wasn't going to take it with me to New York. Get in the Volvo, little Miss Funny Pants! My guest was still smiling as we pulled out of the driveway. I ordered a full rack of ribs and 2 Fosters. Would you be so kind as to explain the car story? Ramon didn't have time to buy winter wheat. Everyone thought he was crazy. When the price started dropping, he started doubling contracts. In less than a week, he made over $40 million. He was happy about the money, but he was ecstatic about the comments he got about his smart move. Well, good for Ramon. I just hope he didn't mention my name. He wanted to give you credit, but not without your approval. He thanked me for bringing you to the party and asked for your address. I didn't know he was going to do that, however. The ribs arrived, and I watched mesmerized as Letitia dipped a few of them in Tabasco before proceeding to eat them. God, I loved that girl. You do know I'm going to send it back in the morning, right? I thought so. Don't worry about it. Ramon won't be offended. He'd love to offer you money, but he probably thought you'd refuse. That way, you'll feel a little more obligated to keep the money. Because of the Tabasco, we had to order a few more beers. I was feeling good and didn't want to go home. At this point, I would have given anything in the world to spend the night in bed with this beautiful young vixen. I envied suave, gallant boy lovers who could get any girl in the world into bed in 5 minutes. The best I could hope for was a goodnight kiss. We couldn't chat all evening, so eventually I was forced to go home. The next morning was absolutely wonderful. All my worries turned out to be for nothing. As soon as we entered the house, Letitia took my hand and led me to the bedroom. Since I was a true gentleman, I did my best to make sure her needs were met first. I was rewarded with the greatest night of sex of my secluded life. Breakfast in bed consisted of juice, coffee, and Danish pastries. I am sorry, but under the circumstances, this is the best I can offer. It's the best I could have hoped for. Trying to eat off a tray in bed is very uncomfortable. After a few giggles and rearrangements, we retired to the kitchen. Breakfast in bed sounds neater than it is. Letitia, I don't want to spoil the mood, but I'm really curious. Why did you choose me? I don't have much to offer, and you deserve so much. I've been burned many times by slick, gallant boy lovers. I won't fall into that trap again. Oh, I understand. You're attracted to me because I'm neither agile nor gallant. My guest found this amusing and laughed a little. Gary, I was impressed with the deal you made in New York with James. I was just selling some coins. Not that silly. I found your proposed agreement to donate to the Land Trust Fund intriguing. You believe I'm a philanthropist? Oh, not at all. I see you as a devious bastard who took advantage of a unique situation to screw over his wife's lover. Of course, that brought a smile to my face. I was amazed at how smart she was and how well she hit it. Was it wrong? No, Gary, it was brilliant. I was impressed and wanted to know more about you. You couldn't have known in New York what I was up to. I knew what you did, but I didn't find out why until days later. You were testing me? Of course I'm not stupid. I have to admit, the self-esteem boost was refreshing. Unfortunately, Letitia had an early morning flight to New York. I hated to see her go. She left me with a happy heart and a key to her apartment. The Lamborghini dealer couldn't come to pick up the car until the next day. That was okay because I wasn't going to drive it. The movers came in a small truck and picked up my stuff to go to New York. Terry Davis called and told me that Keystone Development was in serious financial trouble. It seemed that Clayton had mysteriously lost almost all of its investors practically overnight. There were rumors that some people were taking deposits that Clayton had outstanding. That evening, my almost ex-wife came to visit me. To what did I owe this unexpected pleasure? I couldn't resist being sarcastic. I need to talk to you about some things. I'm leaving in a few days, but I'll help you in any way I can. I was going to borrow my old Volvo, but I noticed it was gone. What's that orange car in the garage? Things were starting to get interesting. I'm sorry, Marcy. When you said you didn't want your old Volvo, I sold it back to the dealer. He might still have it if you want to check. Shit. I've never heard Marcy use that term before. The orange car was a gift, but I'll still return it tomorrow. I can't imagine myself driving something like that. The sticker on the window said $225,000. Who would give you a gift like that? Your new girlfriend? No, it was a cattleman from Argentina I helped a few weeks ago. He just wanted to show his appreciation. So what else can I do for you? There was a pause in the conversation. I realized that Marcy wanted to say something else, but didn't know how to do it. You want something to drink? I have a beer and some diet soda. No, I can't stay long. How'd you even get here? I don't see a car. I took a cab. Gary, you said you were leaving in a few days. Is it okay if I stay at the house for a while? The house is sold. We closed the deal yesterday, and the new owners are moving their stuff in this weekend. They're letting me stay until Friday, but no more than that. What's wrong with the apartment by the river? She didn't answer that question. There was a brief lull, and then she asked, What happened to the money you got for the house? Now things were getting really interesting. I was starting to enjoy the way this conversation was developing. It was all gone. You made it clear that you didn't want any of it. What money I had, I used to buy a new apartment where I'm moving to. Where are you moving? New York. I got a promotion and a big raise. I'm supposed to be there on Monday. I wasn't going to tell Marcy I was going to live with Letitia. I wasn't going to tell her about the bank account in the Caymans either. You never told me what happened to the apartment. It was only rented. The lease expired and the owner didn't want to renew it. Where are you living now? We're staying at the Holiday Inn until Clayton can find a new place. Oh, I see. Now I understood why she wanted to move into our old house. Marcy looked a little confused. She wanted to ask for help, but she didn't know how to go about it. I realized she was in trouble. There was a lull in the conversation again. Is there anything else I can do for you? Could you give me a ride back to the Holiday Inn? The first half of the ride passed in silence. I understand you have a girlfriend. Tell me about her. She's not really a friend, more of a business partner. What kind of business? You're not in any business. You're right. I'm just a grocery clerk. I can't fool you, can I? Marcy was silent. She was looking out the window, and I heard her whisper to herself, Bastard. It was the perfect moment for me to vent all my frustration. It was the perfect opportunity to let her know how much the pictures in the papers had hurt me. But instead, I just smiled to myself. She was in dire straits, and I was rewarded. I felt bad for a moment, but it passed quickly. I dropped her off at the entrance to the motel. She left without once looking back or saying goodbye. I hate to admit it, but I felt a small sense of satisfaction. It had been a good week. Thursday morning, I unexpectedly received my divorce papers. They came early, but who am I to complain? On the front page of the Huntsville paper was a picture of Letitia Rothberg arriving at the airport. Yours truly was holding her hand. A copy of the newspaper is delivered free of charge to each room at the Holiday Inn. Marcy will be able to read it over breakfast. I was sure Clayton would explain to her who Letitia was. I emptied the safety deposit box at the bank. My 7 pennies would come in handy in the near future. I thought Letitia would ask about them while she was here, but she never once broached the subject. All our conversations were strictly social. If she was interested in me for business reasons, she never mentioned it. On all the coins auctioned off, I listed a buy-it-now price. More than half of them were sold at that price. I spent the rest of the day packing up the coins that were sold and preparing them for mailing to the post office. The rest of the auction had to close by noon on Friday. If all payments through PayPal go through, all coins will be mailed the same day. Any unscrupulous buyers would have to wait until Monday. Early Saturday morning, I was on the road. Most of the money from my PayPal account was transferred to my Cayman account. I also left a small amount in PayPal in case I saw something I just needed. The people who bought the house drove up just as I was leaving. It was a win-win for both of us. The trip north would take about 12 hours without delay. Letitia was home and promised to prepare a home-cooked dinner for my arrival. I wondered who would cook it. It was good to know that I was still man enough to win the heart of such a beautiful woman. I had no doubt that I could fulfill all her expectations. I was just crossing the Virginia state line on Interstate 81 when Cindy called. It seems Clayton Manning had skipped town and left Marcy with no car, no place to live, no money, and a big motel bill. I asked Cindy what she thought I should do. She laughed and replied, "Smile.